Okay, welcome to another Orbiter 2010 video, and this video is going to be a fly with me style video. I'm here in the standard Deltaglider in orbit around Earth, and I'm going to simply land, I remember setting this scenario up a couple of years ago, I think it was, as a way for me to just practice deorbit reentry and landing. I just took off from KSC, flew about halfway around. We're not quite halfway around yet. And then I have the scenario saved. We are on track. If I target Cape Canaveral and set the number of orbits to 1, you can see that according to base sync MFD, we are on track to land, or we're on track to cross over Cape Canaveral on our very next orbit. So that'd be a great opportunity for us to land without having to do big base alignment or without having to do any kind of a large cross range. In fact, I'll even post this scenario on my Dropbox, and I'll put a link to it in the description down below if you want to check it out. It's a really good scenario to play with for practicing deorbit reentry and landing, especially if you're fairly new to Orbiter. So let's go the rest of the way to the point where we'll be at the halfway mark.
Rotation.
And while we're doing that, I'll put in a little bit of rotation so that we can get over toward the retrograde position by the time we're halfway around, watching the distance readout here. And we'll also know that we're halfway around when this green line is basically straight across from this yellow line. And we should be reaching the halfway point. Yep, we topped out. We're halfway around. So let's just hit the retrograde autopilot. Bring up orbit MFD on that side. Make sure projection is ship. Make sure distance is PEA and APA. And then we'll bring the periapsis down to about 40 kilometers, somewhere around there. And full power on the main engines. Watching the PEA carefully, and there it is. Go a little bit lower than that. Let's go to 35. Turn off the retrograde autopilot so that we do not waste that fuel, and let's do a re-entry check. Got the radiator closed. Don't believe it was ever opened. Got the nose cone closed. Retro doors are closed, and we don't have hover doors to close or scram doors to close in this particular vessel. So we're all set for re-entry. Let's warp time forward until our altitude gets down to 120 kilometers. That's entry interface. And we're there. So let's
Translation. Rotation.
put in a little bit of rotation so we can get the vessel facing the right direction a little more quickly. And there we are. Okay, now we can warp time forward a little bit farther. We're down to 100 kilometers, but we don't really get any effect here from the atmosphere till we're a bit lower. So let's get down a little bit more. Keep an eye on our off-base distance too. We've got a lot of cross range to work with, so we don't need to worry about trying to keep that at 0 by any means, but we'll keep an eye on it. Okay, we're down to about 80 kilometers now, and we're still coming down through the atmosphere at 100 meters a second. Let me bring up surface MFD on this side, and we'll kind of keep an eye on dynamic pressure and all that. And let's turn surface controls on and rotation off. And actually, I'd imagine we could go down a little bit lower even. Keeping an eye on the vertical speed as well. Okay, now I'm just kind of thinking about things a bit. We are 5,700 kilometers out. Go ahead and roll over. The distance to the base is climbing, but we've got a ton of cross range, so we don't need to worry too much about keeping that really low. But on the other hand, we don't want to let it climb. Don't want the off-base distance to get way out to launch. And let me bring up another MFD. Let's bring up aero brake just so we have some idea of when we're going to run out of energy. And let's pitch, or let's roll out a little bit. Let's switch over to surface HUD also. Not going to worry too much about having a super smooth, super cool ride down through the atmosphere. I don't actually know what the limitations of the standard Deltaglider are. Actually, I do. There are no limitations, practically speaking. It's made of unobtainium, but realistically, there would be a number here in the dynamic pressure that you would not want to exceed, and I don't know what that number is. Let's go ahead and throw out the air brake though, because we've got a lot of velocity we need to get rid of. Kind of roll out a little bit. Wait till we slow down until we get too much lower. But I do want to continually descend, so I'm not going to let that number get above 0. Try not to. Vertical speed I'm referring to. I don't want to let the vertical speed really get above 0 because I don't want to climb. And as our distance continues to increase here in a little bit, we'll do a complete roll. But what we'll do is we'll go in toward the planet so that our vertical speed goes into the negative, as opposed to rolling back out the other way, because then we'll climb. $4,500 kilometers out. Dynamic pressure is 13 kilopascals. And I have to do a little bit more homework myself to really know what those numbers mean. And I have a general idea, like when I'm going from KSC to wide awake, I know that my dynamic pressure needs to be a certain amount, or else I'll lose control and fly out into space. But specifically, I don't really know a lot about that information. Let's go ahead and do a roll. So we're going to roll upside down. We're going to go into the negative on our vertical speed. But that will now bring our distance to the base closer to 0. Roll back out a bit more towards space though, so that our vertical speed doesn't get so low. Dynamic pressure is 14.5 and climbing. About 4,000 kilometers out from the base, down to 6,600 meters a second. Rolling back in toward the planet a bit so that I can keep the vertical speed from getting above 0. Don't want to climb. According to aero brake MFD, we're coming up short. So here in a little bit I'll close the air brake. Matter of fact, I think I'll close it now. That'll extend our glide out quite a ways. Dynamic pressure increasing ever so slightly. And we're going to throw the air brake back out for a little bit because according to aerobrake MFD we're coming up pretty long, so we need to lose a lot more velocity still. Distance off base is almost back to 0, so we'll let it get to 0 and then we'll let it go the other direction for a while. Vertical speed almost 0. Dynamic pressure about 14.5. And in case you don't know where I'm looking at for the dynamic pressure, it's right here. DNP. Speed down to 6,000 meters a second, 6 kilometers. Off-base distance is now back to 0 and going the other way. Let's retract the air brake for a little bit to see what aerobrake says our glide's going to be, and you can see that it's showing, that green part's going way out here, so we've still got a lot more energy than we need. It's unfortunate that we can't zoom in and out with this so that we could keep a track on that green line to see exactly, where it's at in relation to the base. Let's throw the air brake back out. We're 2,700 meters from the base, and according to aerobrake MFD, with the air brake in, we're still passing the base by a long way. And rolling back out towards space just a little bit because our dynamic pressure is increasing. And I don't know again what that number should be, but I'm just kind of picking around 15 as my measurement. Let's roll back in toward the planet a bit. Vertical speed 7 meters a second into the negative. So let's roll heads up a little bit. Let's zero out our vertical speed, and then we're going to do a complete roll underneath again because our off-base distance is now 150 kilometers. Okay, vertical speed's basically 0, so let's do a 180. And see, as we go under, it really sends our vertical speed really far into the negative, so that's why we want to zero it out before we roll over. And with the air brake extended, I can see here in aerobrake MFD that I'm right at the base. Still have 2,000 kilometers to go, basically. We're down to 5,400 meters a second. Bringing the vertical speed up a bit, just leveling the vessel out a little bit. And I think we can actually just kind of coast at this particular configuration. Well, let's see. One thing we can check is that if aerobrake can be believed, then we'll be at 186 meters a second by the time we get to that point. That's pretty slow. So we'll actually retract the air brake here at some point so that we have a little bit more velocity by the time we get over to the base. 1,800 kilometers to go. And it takes a little bit longer you know, the farther out you go, because we're constantly slowing down. In fact, we could probably retrieve the air brake for a little bit. You can see when we do that, that our velocity just climbs dramatically, and it says that we're going to overshoot the base by a very, very long way. But that's okay. That I just want to conserve some of the velocity for a little bit longer, because we still got a ways to go, 1,600 kilometers to go. Let's pitch up a little bit. Dynamic pressure is getting above 15, and I don't know that that necessarily means anything, but I mean, it certainly won't hurt the impenetrable Deltaglider, but I would like to just kind of keep a target in mind and try to fly according to that target. Okay, so our vertical speed is zeroed out. We'll just kind of fly here at 47 kilometers altitude until we slow down a bit more. Let's throw the air brake back out for a little bit. We're down to 1,300 kilometers from the base. And we're slowly cooling off. And now I'm going to bring up aero brake on this side because we don't really need base sync. So target Cape Canaveral, page, projection, and I think that's all the data we need. Not sure what the distance from the base is at the moment. Guess we're down to 900 kilometers, something like that. Bring up map MFD over here. Yeah, we're pretty close. Watch my dynamic pressure, it's climbing. So let me go back to kind of a level attitude here and zero out the vertical speed. And we're almost home. Cooling off. Let's look at map MFD. If I kind of bank here a bit to the left and pull back, and it can increase my angle of attack, that'll expose more of the bottom part of the vessel to the atmosphere. Again, we don't have an attitude hold autopilot in the standard Deltaglider, so we have to kind of make do. You see dynamic pressures coming down. Currently at 3,500 meters a second, horizontal speed. Increasing my angle of attack a little bit. And I think we're crossing over the west coast of Florida right now, and we're still at 3,000 meters a second. So we've got quite a bit of velocity still to bleed off, and I can see myself coming around an aero brake MFD there. Dynamic pressure's down, but below 15. Okay, now we're going to turn the other way. And you can see we still got plenty of momentum to get to the destination. You can see over there in aero brake MFD that green line indicates where we're going to end up. And of course we're right here by the base. We're not very far away at all at this point. So we're just going to do a bunch of S turns here to slow down. And then hopefully land. So we're almost 40 kilometers altitude. We're down to 2,300 meters a second. Dynamic pressure is 14. It's manageable. I think I'll actually pull in the air brake at this point. And it looks like we're basically going to do a big 180, and then we'll be out in front of Cape Canaveral. We'll be to the north of it. And we should have plenty of energy left over to still make a landing unpowered. See, right now we're basically southeast. Now we're almost straight east of the base. See if I can look outside and... Yep. Oh, got to jump back inside. I can't fly from the external view. So we're almost down. Almost 34 kilometers in altitude, 1,200 and, well, about 1,300 meters a second horizontal speed, so we still got plenty of energy. Looks like now we're about northeast at the base. So let's just kind of continue turning around toward the base. Everything's nice and cool at this point. Okay, so we will be turning in toward the runway here in just a moment. If I had a wider screen, I might even be able to see it by now. We're straight north. And we're going to land on runway 15. A little bit more to go. Down to 690 meters a second. Still at 26 kilometers. And runways should be coming into view any second. There they are. And as luck would have it, we are basically straight in front of runway 15. Almost couldn't have planned that better, even if I tried. So come around a little bit more. And here we go. Now, the actual landing on the runway part. What I do is, it's a lot by feel, but just one thing to keep in mind is wherever the velocity vector is pointed, that's where you are going. So if you have the velocity vector pointed, way to the left of the runway or way above the runway or whatever else, then that's where you're going. So what I do is I'm basically straight with the runway now. And I just want to keep that velocity vector pointed right at the beginning of the runway, and then I'll make adjustments as necessary as I get closer. But the runway's right here, and my velocity vector's lined up with it very well. I'll throw the air brake out for just a second, slow down a bit. I'm going to say that's good enough. We'll be subsonic here very soon. Got the runway lights in view. And we'll try to keep about a 20-degree down pitch. Everything looks very straight to me. Feels like I'm a bit off to the right, so maybe I'll put in a little bit of left bank here for a second. Coming down through the clouds. 257 meters a second. And once we get down a little bit lower, we can throw out the landing gear, and the landing gear can actually help provide braking if we need in terms of speed, if we're going a bit too fast. But we don't want to put out the landing gear till we're down. In the XR2, I think you need to be below 180 meters a second before you put out the landing gear, somewhere around that number. I don't think the standard Deltaglider can actually have problems with the landing gear, so you can put it out whenever you want, but
You are cleared to land.
we'll probably wait till about the last second.
2,500.
And one thing to keep in mind is the standard Deltaglider doesn't float nearly as well as the XR2, so hold on to a little bit of extra velocity. Okay, we're lined up with the runway.
1,000.
Landing gear air brake.
500. 400. 300.
Gear down.
200.
Pull the air brake back in, we're slow enough.
100.
Watch the vertical speed.
50. 40. 30. 20. 10.
And brakes. And F8 so we can actually see the runway. I think I actually landed more center on the runway, but since I couldn't see the center line after a touchdown, I think the Deltaglider veered to the right a little bit. If I'd had this view up when I touched down, I think I could have kept better control over that. Anyway, that's a 30-minute video coming down from orbit and landing the standard Deltaglider. It's something that I would like to improve upon. I've landed the standard Deltaglider a lot, but one thing that I have trouble with the standard Deltaglider is coming down through the atmosphere without having just a super high dynamic pressure, because it doesn't have that attitude hold. And I don't want to take 2 hours to land either. There's a way that you can bring the XR2 or standard Deltaglider down through the atmosphere, and you can just basically bring it down very gradually so that your temperature never increases above 300 C or whatever. And that's just a matter of keeping your vertical speed at a certain number so that you just cut through the atmosphere really slow. I don't like doing that because it just takes forever. I like to be able to land within 20 minutes or a half hour, not 2 hours. So I do want to work on my own personal Deltaglider landings a little bit more, because I think I can still improve upon that. Make sure that the dynamic pressure doesn't increase as much as it did here. But nevertheless, it's just something I'll work on. And again, I'll post this scenario in the description box down below, so if you want to try this out yourself, you can. And let me know what your results are. And if you make a video of it, let me know so I can check out your video. If you like the video, hit the like button down below, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, check out my Facebook page. See you in the next video.